Hello everyone and welcome to this release webinar for Squared Up 4.2. My name is Richard Benwell and I have the pleasure of taking you through our latest Squared Up release. As always, we have our team online ready to answer questions, so if you are joining us live, please do take the opportunity to engage with us, ask questions, give feedback about what you're seeing or anything else that's sort of on your mind at the moment, and the team online would be really pleased to receive that sort of feedback and respond to you. So that's a great sort of opportunity if you are joining us live. And as always, we'll be recording this webinar, so if you have to drop off or can't catch it all, you can always catch it on YouTube once we've uploaded it. All right, so the agenda for today is obviously talking about Squared Up 4.2. What I'll do is I'll start by putting that in the context of our overall roadmap, so where we've been and where we're going. Then I'll introduce the theme behind Squared Up 4.2, so really intent of what we're trying to achieve with this latest release. I'll be going then through the release feature by feature. So as you're used to hopefully by now, we'll be looking at each of those new features in live demos, and I'll try and sort of show the features at their best and really sort of demonstrate what you can do with each one of those. I'll finish off by talking about just availability and any upgrade advice around 4.2. And then we'll just cover a couple of bits of news that you may have missed if you haven't been keeping up with what's going on here at Squared Up. And I'll finish off by just looking at whether any questions have come in that we want to highlight to all of the audience if they come in either during the webinar or at the end there. I think this is a really interesting release. Those features, which I'll go on to talk about in a second, have a huge amount of sort of value, and you'll be doing some amazing new things with Squared Up 4.2. But they do take a little bit of time just to really explain fully. So we'll see probably about sort of a 45-minute webinar this time round. I think there'll be loads more content. So if I don't cover everything today, I'm pretty sure we'll be doing a coffee break around some of these new features next month. So watch this space for even more information about Squared Up 4.2 and the new features coming later. So let's start off now just by looking at the roadmap. Depending on when you joined us on our journey with Squared Up, you'll probably know that we have a reputation for delivering innovation and new value on top of System Center Operations Manager over the years. And that really was continued with our Squared Up 4.0 release back at Ignite 2018, where we introduced the concepts of enterprise applications to SCOM, giving you end-to-end enterprise application monitoring, from availability monitoring through to mapping and dependencies. We also introduced team folders and the matrix tile in that release as well. And what we also announced that we were doing was going to start iterating on feature releases more frequently and more regularly than we had done previously. So we released 4.1 back in February. It was more of a platform release, so we updated our licensing user experience. We also really radically reworked some of the Vader internals to improve the performance and scalability of Vader. And we introduced a new licensing models, including the Essentials edition that I'll talk about just right at the end of this webinar. So that was the first of one of the 4.x releases. And we'll be continuing that trend now, including the release today. So that's 2 months after 4.1. We're now releasing 4.2, and I'll come on in a second to talk about exactly what features are in that. But you will expect to see additional 4.x releases now, roughly on the cadence of every 2 months. I'm not going to go into detail on what's coming next, but you would expect another one of these webinars probably around the end of June. And we'll be talking about some of the next features in 4.3 and so on all the way through 2019. We do have some really nice features coming. I can't wait to be talking about these in future webinars around improvements to Vader discovery, really looking at our performance reporting, looking at alert views within Squared Up, and of course a lot of work going on around Azure integration. So plenty more to talk about later on this year. So hopefully this will be, again, the sort of the second release of many feature releases you'll see from Squared Up in 2019. So Squared Up 4.2 is all about enhanced perspective authoring. And I'll go on in a second and talk about exactly what perspectives are and why we've done this. But what we've done now with the feature releases on V4 is to sort of focus each feature release on a certain theme, a certain area of the product that we really wanted to improve and introduce a set of new features for. So the theme for 4.2 is all around perspective authoring. So just to recap quickly on what are perspectives. Perhaps you're completely new to Squared Up and this is sort of something new to you, or perhaps you've heard of perspectives but never really understood how they work or sort of how to use them. But broadly, you can think of a perspective as a drill down dashboard. So it's a dashboard, but a dashboard that you get to by drilling down into a particular object, like on the diagram on the right there. We've drilled down into a particular application. We get into a context. So when we drill down, we're in the context of a particular object or a monitor density, as it's called in SCOM, and we can create dashboards on top of that object. So perspectives are dashboards that you drill down into in the context of an object. And those perspectives can target a specific object. So for example, we can build dashboards on top of our sales application, which is an object in SCOM, or we can also create templates. So these perspectives can be template dashboards that then appear dynamically depending on the type of object you're drilling down into. So an example there would be to create a view on a SQL server as a template perspective, and then whenever you drill down into any SQL server in your environment, you're going to see that view. So that's really good for either getting pre-canned dashboards from dashboard packs from the community, or building your own custom views that you can then really specialize how the data in SCOM is viewed by your users. And really it is around specializing those views for every object, and this idea of dashboard all the things. We didn't want to just be a top level dashboarding tool that's great for throwing up a dashboard onto a wall monitor, but as soon as you start drilling down, you get lost into the the sort of nitty gritty of SCOM object models and data types and so on. We wanted to make sure that if you have a top-level dashboard, you can drill all the way down into an application, a server, a disk, a database, and still have meaningful data at your fingertips at every level. And this is really what we call our total dashboard architecture that was introduced with version 3 of Squared Up back in 2016. So that's sort of some of the thinking behind perspectives, and a really important part of perspectives now in V4 is that perspectives are the way you create dashboards for your enterprise applications. So with introducing enterprise applications in version 4 of the product, we've introduced a new class of object in SCOM called an enterprise application. It's like a distributed application, but this time it works. And so you've now got this new object type that you can drill down into. So if you want to create custom dashboards for your applications, either a particular application or again a template dashboard that appears for every one of your applications, you now do that using perspectives rather than top-level standalone dashboards. So this was why we really wanted to focus on perspectives in 4.2, is to really now make that enterprise application dashboarding even easier. So the features we have in 4.2 are all around this perspective authoring experience. We have streamlined the authoring user experience in general, both for perspectives and dashboards. We have introduced perspective hiding. So now you can both add new perspectives to different types of objects, but also suppress particular perspectives for particular objects and tidy up that perspective ribbon at the top there. We've introduced a really exciting new feature that leverages the SCOM object model for intelligent tile scoping. So this makes it even easier to add the different data that you want to see onto your perspectives. And we've updated our WebAPI integrations to support multi-object queries. So all of these come together to improve the perspective authoring experience. And actually, the focus for our product development teams for 4.2 has been around creating these perspectives for enterprise applications, so making it easier to create dashboards for your EAs. In fact, internally, the theme was called EA dashboards. Everything I'm about to show you was designed for specifically EA dashboards as the primary use case, but everything I'm going to show you here applies to all perspectives across the product. So whether it's an enterprise application or a server or a group, you can use all of these features. So, of course, if you are only on an ESP or an enterprise license and not the EAM, as I say, all these features are available to you. They're available at every edition of the product. All right, so let's get going with the first feature. What I'm going to do is take these 4 features one by one, just sort of introduce them, explain them a little bit, and then we'll dive into a demo to show off each one. And as I say, if you're joining us live on the webinar, please do take the opportunity to ask questions as we go along. All right, so first up is our streamlined authoring user experience. This is not the big feature that we were intending to produce at 4.2. This actually kind of came out just from some nice improvements that we made along the way. So this is just a little sort of appetizer before the main event, or maybe even an hors d'oeuvre, just a sort of small sort of taster to get you going of some of the improvements we have here. So a couple of user experience tweaks to make it even easier to edit perspectives. First one is fast publish. This is really nice. It just makes it a really nice seamless experience. So when you now publish new dashboards or perspectives, or if you're editing and making changes, it no longer needs a page reload. And I'll show you that in a second. Just really sort of nice, smooth experience, and makes creating a dashboard now really a matter of a second or two and no longer. And in addition to that, we've just made a small change to where the perspective settings live. So they no longer appear automatically every time you go into edit mode. So now if you edit a perspective, you can dive straight into just to editing the tiles instead of having this perspective settings banner open up each time. So okay, let's just have a look at how this looks and warm up to our demos. We'll come back to our demo environment for some of those later features, but let's just start by having a look at these UX tweaks. So if I just come over to our demo environments, this should all be very familiar to you. What I'm going to do is actually just start with a regular dashboard, and we'll come to perspectives in a minute. But if I just come into my demo folder here, I'm just going to show you now how easy it is to create a new dashboard. As I say, not even any page reload. So if I create a new dashboard, let's stick on the alerts as we're used to, and with one click now that is published. So as you see, there's no page reload. That's gone straight out and published as a new dashboard. So it makes it even easier and sort of smoother to create and edit these dashboards. If I come into edit mode and do the same thing. So this was just a demo, and hit publish. Again, that's now published. Or I can do the same with sort of discarding changes as well. So if I make a mistake, which I often do, just hit discard and I'm back into the edit mode. So that's kind of a nice little improvement there to really improve your dashboarding experience across the board. If we now come into perspectives and really sort of get into the meat of the features for 4.2, let's start just by coming into our status dashboard for our enterprise applications here. So this was the dashboard we saw just in that PowerPoint slide there. So the nice overview. This lists off all of our enterprise applications and the availability of these applications as monitored by our availability monitors. So we now drill down into the sales app, which is currently showing green. We are now in a drill down. We've drilled down into a specific object. You can see that in the URL as well. So we've gone into a drill down for a SCOM object. And this is where we build dashboards for our enterprise application. So for one application, we actually have a number of dashboards. Here are some that are out of the box and some that we've added in other demos here. But you can see this idea of perspectives. I can see the overall application health. I can have a look at the availability, dependencies, and so on. So each of these is a separate standalone dashboard on top of this sales application. So I can have multiple views of the same application. So just as one of those other little UX tweaks here is if I hit a new perspective, I get a new perspective, as you'd imagine, and my perspective settings panel opens. So here you can see I've got a new perspective. So let's call this sales app. And I can move that over. So that's my new perspective for this application. If I just publish that out, what I wanted to show you now is if I come back in to edit that perspective, I no longer get that perspective settings appearing at the top of the page. I can now dive straight in and just be editing some of these tiles, whereas before, every time you went into edit mode, the settings panel would appear at the top there. If you do want to change the settings for this perspective, you'll now find that in this new button at the top there called settings. So I do want to come back in and rename it or retarget it. You'll find that under the settings panel. So just very subtle. I just wanted to point them out both in terms of, you notice just dashboard authoring is a bit faster. That's because it's not reloading pages. And if you are looking for that settings panel, it's now tucked away neatly underneath that button there. So just a couple of UX tweaks to improve the creation and editing of perspectives. So that was our little warm up. Now let's get into our sort of our first course, a nice sort of appetizer for the main event coming later. And this is perspective hiding. So some feedback we had from previous versions of Squared Up, and certainly now with enterprise applications, is that it's nice that you can add in these additional perspectives and dashboards for these drill downs, but sometimes you're left with perspectives that are no longer needed. They're unused. Maybe they're replaced by your own custom perspectives, or perhaps they're advanced perspectives that really aren't needed by your users. And ideally, you'd want to remove those out of the perspective ribbon. So you can now do that. You can suppress perspectives, which essentially makes them hidden by default. And a good example there is the monitored entity perspective that is there for every single object you drill down into. It's the sort of raw SCOM view. It's great as a backup. It's great if you are a SCOM administrator and sort of understand what you're looking at. But it's probably an advanced view for many users and can be confusing, especially if you're looking at something top level like an enterprise application where the monitored entity view doesn't really hold much useful information for you. So that's an example of a sort of perspective that you want to suppress there and make hidden by default. You can suppress perspectives either for a specific object. So for one object, you can say, I don't want this perspective shown by default, or you can suppress perspectives based on a group or a class. So very, very much like perspective targeting, where you're actually sort of showing the perspective in the first place. We're using the word suppress just because what suppressing does is it makes it hidden by default, so users don't see it. It's hidden under an arrow on the right-hand side, but they are still accessible. So you're not actually removing them entirely. You're not blocking access to them. You're just tucking them away behind this arrow on the right-hand side. So let's have a look at how that looks in a demo. So let's come back to our demo environment. So here I've got my sales application. We'll come back to this dashboard in a second. What we do have is our set of perspectives, so the sort of built-in perspectives, but we also have some of these built-in perspectives that just aren't that useful at an EA level. Really, there's nothing on this view that I need my users to access day to day. It's a little bit confusing, and certainly if there was anything here, I could probably better surface that into a custom perspective. So what I can do is come into Edit. As I say, the settings now for this perspective are up on this settings page here. So I can come up and we can see that this perspective called monitored entity targets all objects. So this dashboard, this perspective is available for every single object in the entire system. So what I'd like to do is not undo that. I still want that available everywhere, but I want to suppress this perspective for enterprise applications. And you can see I can suppress it for the sales app or all objects of a certain type or all objects in a certain group. So here I'm just going to say, actually, I don't want the monitored entity perspective visible for any object of class enterprise application, which is obviously all my EAs created through Squared Up. So I just click add there. What you'll see is at the moment that perspective is up there. If I just click add as that suppression rule, it's now there. I can remove that, but you'll now see that the monitored entity perspective is tucked away behind this arrow. So I'm just going to publish that. Let me just refresh this and you'll sort of see the view. So now as a user who drills down into the sales application, we'll get their perspectives here. They won't see that monitored entity perspective unless they click on the arrow and it reveals those additional perspectives. So we can do that with, say, the performance perspective as well. This is available for every single object. It shows the performance metrics in the data warehouse collected for that object. And of course, there are no performance metrics collected for an EA. So again, this is a really good example where we want to take this perspective, not undo the targeting, but we do want to say, don't show me this for enterprise applications. It doesn't make sense. It's an advanced view that should really never be used by my regular users. So do the same thing there, and you can see that performance perspective has now been tucked away neatly behind that arrow. So in the out of the box, so if you install Squared Up for the first time, I think these two perspectives are now suppressed by default for EAs. If you upgrade to 4.2, you can now implement the same thing yourself just by going through that process I've just shown you. And obviously you can do this at EAs, but you can do this at every level, any object. So if you want to, for example, get rid of monitored entity for servers, for example, you can do that for all servers as well. It is worth keeping it there. Obviously, it's a useful backup view. If I think I'm right in thinking, if the only perspective available for a drill down, so maybe you drill down to an obscure object that doesn't have any customized perspectives, it will still show the monitored entity perspective there for you. All right, so that's perspective hiding. As I say, many customers have asked for that. Often what they've done is taken a built-in perspective, say like group members for a group object, implemented a custom perspective for particular objects, and then they want to get rid of that built-in perspective. And that's exactly what you can do now with perspective hiding. So that sort of summarizes what I've just been showing there. So that's a nice sort of warm up again. So that's hopefully starts to make you see how you can customize the available perspectives for any drill down. So now for really a feature that is an amazing new feature. Hopefully we should have had this since day one. I was just speaking to my co-host for many webinars, Matthew Long, and he's saying, it's another feature that just is leveraging the SCOM object model. Really is what SCOM was designed to do, and sort of finally we've incorporated that into Squared Up and made this as easy as it should be, and that is intelligent tile scoping. So what we've done is we've now made it really easy to scope tiles on perspectives to objects in your object model without really actually now having to understand the complexities behind the SCOM object model, so the classes, the relationships, and how this object model is constructed. Essentially, every now time you add a tile onto a perspective, you get automatic suggestions for the tile scoping. So you don't have to now manually think about how you're going to go from the enterprise application object through down into your server objects that are somewhere in that object model. That will now be surfaced as an automatic suggestion. So for example, I want to add in all SQL databases in the application map onto this application dashboard, and that will now be presented as a suggestion automatically. So no more getting lost in SCOM classes and relationships. It allows you just to essentially scope a tile with one click. So if the suggestion is what you want, it's just a matter of clicking on that, and that tile is scoped. We do then allow you to take one of these automatic suggested scopes and look at how it's implemented and modify it. And I'll hopefully show that in a demo in a second. So you can still do advanced scoping for particular scenarios you have in mind. So, and actually what I should have said there is this works both for enterprise applications. As I say, we've sort of focused on that authoring experience, but this does work everywhere in the product, and I'll show you that in the demo in just a second. So let's come back to our blank perspective here, our blank dashboard that's just crying out for some data on it. It's very sad to see a blank dashboard in Squared Up. So let's come into edit mode. And come into the tile editor here. So what I'm going to do first is I want to sort of make this a summary of my sales application. So for example, what I want to do is add the availability monitors onto this dashboard. Now, if you're familiar with our enterprise application object model, we have a top level sales app that contains 3 sort of subgroups called availability, map, and dependencies. Within availability, we then have our availability monitors. Within map, we have further subgroups that represent the application map, and within dependencies, we have a list of objects. So sort of a multi-level hierarchy. Now what I can do, if I just select matrix tile, for example, I'm going to have automatic suggestions for me of how I might want to scope this matrix tile on my enterprise application. So by default, I'm just showing this object, right, which is just the sales app itself. But what we have here now is some suggestions for perhaps what we might want to scope it to. So in this case, it's going to be this object, then slash, as in like go down a level to the availability group, and then go down into the availability monitors. So again, this is like a quirk of the SCOM object model, is that you actually have this other container there, and then you actually get into what you're interested in, which is your enterprise application availability monitoring test. So this is sort of traversing the object model tree, sort of 4 levels. Would actually be really hard to explain, let alone implement as a sort of multi-step scoping. But with one click, I just select that. It's like, yep, that's what I wanted to see. And now I have my availability monitoring added onto the dashboard in one click. So now I can do more of that. So let's just add in another matrix tile. Again, it's going to just sort of determine what are the appropriate suggestions for this object. And as you can see, it does take a little time because this is not built in. So we haven't baked this functionality in for enterprise applications. This is all automatically determined dynamically at runtime. So based on a number of rules, we think these are good suggestions for adding data onto a perspective, and I'll show you how that works outside of EAs as well. So if we look further down the list here, now I want to add on some Windows computers. So this is suggesting that I can go into this object and into the application map. So I can pick out a couple of items there. The star means everything. So if I just wanted to have everything within the map, that would be the 4 subgroups. But what I want to do is select the Windows computers. So again, here's all the Windows computers. But in this case, I actually want to select the Windows computers within the web component group. So again, as an automatic suggestion, we have this object, as in the EA, then drill down into the application map, then drill down into the web component group, and then select the Windows computers within that component group. So one click, and I've now added on my IIS servers. So you can see sort of how much simpler this has made it. Just going to do one more here and show you the databases. So here I want to put on some data from my databases. This is going to be sort of something like DB connections. So again, as a suggestion, just dynamically determined is picking out my database objects that live within a SQL component group within my application map within this EA. So one click, and I should now have that scoped. That should mean that the metrics are now scoped to that database. So if I just want, let's do active connections there. And again, I've now got my database connection load for my EA. So I've managed to build this dashboard on top of my enterprise application, which is backed by quite a relatively complex object model in SCOM, but without really having to get dirty with any of the SCOM object model at all. I've just managed to do that all through point and click, and we have quite a nice now dashboard on top of all that data available to me. So click to publish, and I now have a dashboard for my sales application built on top of all that related data. What I thought I'd do is just show you now, I'll come back to that in a second. I just wanted to show you that working outside of an enterprise application. So if I come into, say, a SQL server, here again, I've got a number of perspectives for my SQL server. And let me just show you how, if I were to now create a perspective here, which for some reason there's no default databases view for a SQL server, so I'm going to select my own perspective here. So this is going to target all SQL computers. That's 2016, that'll do. And again, if I now choose to show some data, so let's go with just status, icons, I'm going to get my automatic suggestions. So same deal, but now this time it's in the context of a Windows server. And again, these are dynamically determined. There's no sort of hard coding of these relationships. And I can choose this object, which is the server itself, or it suggested some types of objects on this server that I might be interested in. So for example, I can choose this server down into the database engine and then choose the databases. So just with a couple of clicks there, I can now have that list of databases that are on my server. Hit publish, and that's now available to any SQL server in my environment. If I drill down into a database itself, so let's come down into the order prop platform database. This is all very nice. These are just the sort of metrics I want to see for a database, but let's just see another example of that scoping, but now at an arbitrary object, which is a database. So I'm going to call this other DBs on this server. It's a bit wordy, but it'll do for a demo. So I'm looking at a database. I want to look at the other databases that are on the server. So let's just choose a status tile with icons, and I get it. I can show a parent, for example, some group that this is part of, or I can show the sibling databases. So these are all databases or other databases on this server. And again, if I hit publish, that's available now as a perspective on any database I drill down into. I can quickly see the other databases on the same server, on the same database engine. It's a really, really powerful way of building out your perspectives, leveraging the SCOM object model. I think I've got time. I'm just going to show you a fairly sort of advanced view of all this, and then a little bit sort of explaining what's happening behind the scenes. This dashboard I built here was specifically for my sales app, but let's try and build a perspective now on top of an enterprise application that will show the database performance, and we'll make it a template dashboard that's going to appear for any enterprise application that has SQL databases in it. So let's call this SQL performance. What I'm going to do is say, actually, instead of specifically the sales app, I want this perspective to appear for any enterprise application. Let's see if I can get this right. So I'm just going to publish that to start with. And now let's come in. And I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm just going to choose some performance data for my databases. And just let's choose that, even that same metric. Or let's choose a different one. Let's go with transactions a second. Okay, so this is the transactions per second going through the SQL database in my sales app. Now, before I actually make this a full template that will work for any enterprise application, what I'm going to do is just switch from this automatic suggestion over to custom. And what it will do is show me actually what that suggestion was implemented using. So that suggestion, as you see, was quite complicated. It was saying, given this object, first of all, go down one level on the children to the map object, and then go down another level into any SQL group object, and then go down another level and pick out the databases. So that's the complexity behind these suggestions, but we made it very, very simple with the suggestions. But now for this to work on any enterprise application, I just need to do a couple of things. I need to essentially generalize this. So from my enterprise application, don't go down into the sales app map. I want to go down into just, oops, that is not the right one. I want to go down into the general map for any enterprise application. So that's great. So I've generalized that. And then instead of drilling down specifically into a group called SQL, well, not a group called SQL. This is actually specifically that component group within that enterprise application. If I just generalize it and say any group within any enterprise application map where display name, let's make it a bit more general. So any component group in any application map that has the name SQL in it means that hopefully it will contain some SQL databases, and then I can show some data. So that's still working for this sales app. That's cool. That's great. So that's the performance of my SQL databases. If I now try this out, if I've done this right, I should be able to come and look into another enterprise application like payment processing. And as long as it has some group with the word SQL in it, which it does do, it's got a database in it, that means I should be able to just have a look at SQL performance, and I can see the SQL performance of this enterprise application. So we've built a perspective on one application and then generalized it and said, okay, now let's apply this to all applications. So you can do that, for example, with, say, F5 load balancers. You could now just sort of dynamically search for any F5 load balancers in your application and show data for it, and then target that at all of your applications. So really, really powerful way of building out perspectives on top of enterprise applications and any other object in your environment. So quite a lot to sort of get through there. As I say, if you pick up 4.2, have a really good look at perspectives now and play around with this, and you should find that it's a lot easier just to start building out really meaningful views on top of your drill downs. Previous to 4.2, you were a little bit lost potentially unless you knew exactly the structure of a management pack and the object model. Now you should find it really, really intuitive to start adding on relevant data to your perspectives. All right, so that's really one of the sort of main features in 4.2, really hopefully simplifies perspective authoring. The last one, maybe the sort of dessert course, this really is a sweet feature. It's going to get a little bit more technical, but the results are really phenomenal. If you really sort of get engaged with what you can do with the Web API with 4.2, you can start to do some really incredible things with combining the Web API tile and perspectives. So with 4.2, we have updated the Web API tile to support multi-object queries. As I say, really creates new possibilities for integrating external data sources. So if you have used the Web API tile for integrating, say, ServiceNow, data or Splunk data or App Insights or Azure data, you can now do that, but for multi-object scopes and multi-object queries. So what I mean by that is you can query an external data source against a list or an array of objects. So for example, in the context of an enterprise application, I can now query Splunk logs for all the servers in this application. So previously, I could only query an external data source for one particular object. So given this enterprise application and its data about the enterprise application, go query something. Now I can do a lookup for multiple objects, like all servers in this application, and then use that to construct an external query. So I'll show you that in action in a second. In doing this, we have revamped the query editor. So you may have been familiar with this if you sort of followed the instructions for setting up ServiceNow or Splunk integration in the past. We've now revamped that editor, and it supports JavaScript fragments within this editor. So you can really now start to construct some complex queries. And again, sort of hopefully we'll have a coffee break that goes through a number of different use cases and how we can really leverage this new editor to perform some really interesting integrations. We've been focusing on the Web API. That has been sort of the focus of the effort for 4.2, but this is also supported across other integrations. So, for example, SQL and essentially anywhere you see these editors. So, and just very last thing I'll try and cover in the demo. We've also, as well as revamping this editor, we've just improved the general editor for editing Moustache queries, so in templates and so on. So if you have done any of this stuff before in Squared Up, so using the Moustache syntax, you'll find generally now the user experience is vastly improved with 4.2. So let's take a look at a demo of this Web API multi-object query. So I come back to my demo environment. So let's come back to the sales application. And you'll see here that we have already some integrations. So for example, we've integrated ServiceNow. So this is taking the sales app object from SCOM and performing a query against ServiceNow using data about the sales app object. So for example, its name or its application ID. Okay, so we've always had that in the product for some time now, and we can pull data in from an external data source. What we want to do with 4.2 in the multi-object query is take our list of servers. So for example, take every server in this application, and for every server, go look up its logs in Splunk, or go look up some data in ServiceNow about it. And that wasn't possible before now. So let me just drill down into a SQL server here and sort of show you what I'm going to try and achieve. So when I drill down into a SQL server, here we have a Splunk perspective where I'm putting in application logs for this server. On this server, SQL 03, if I look at the Splunk logs here, I can see, for example, the security logs for this server that are all collected in Splunk. So that has always been possible. And if I come into the editor here, you'll see, if I come in, essentially what we do is we take the server object, we connect to Splunk and hit one of the REST API endpoints for Splunk. And then we have this sort of parameterized query where we're essentially saying to Splunk, give me the security logs where computer name equals, and then we can do the display name of the computer. So that's great, and hopefully if you have tried this within your own environment, you're sort of a little bit familiar with this idea. The problem has been is, well, if I have a list of servers, if it's not just one server, if I've got, say, 20 servers, how on earth do I kind of express a query to Splunk saying, give me the logs for any of these 20 servers or all of these 20 servers? And that's what the problem that we've overcome now with 4.2. So what I'm going to do to save me typing out lots of stuff is just grab the settings for that tile just in JSON. I'm just going to come back over to my sales app and I'm going to put in a new perspective here called Splunk. Well, actually, tell you what I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it security logs, and that's going to be for all of my enterprise applications. Hit publish there. So now what I want to do is I want to add a Web API tile. Actually, I don't even need to do that. I'm just going to paste in that tile definition I borrowed right from my drill down. So this is the same JSON from that drill down. If I hit apply, ooh, there you go. Come back out of that. Now, obviously, I've copied and pasted it from a SQL drill down, so it needs some fixing up. So in this case, I'm just going to change the scope to all Windows computers, but again, I could really just focus on, say, the security logs on my SQL server. In fact, let's just do that. My SQL servers. The provider, great. So it's got the Splunk provider. It's got the Splunk REST API. Now this bit is broken, and actually you can see it's broken. So the tile's saying, well, hang on, display name's not defined because we've got, we've probably got a sort of a couple or a dozen computers here, so we can't just pick one display name. And so this is where the multi-object queries come in. Now, the editor's really nice. You'll see here we've got a highlight on the moustache query. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here so you guys can see it better on your screen. If I hit backspace, I can delete that off in one go. So it's sort of very familiar if you're used to using an editor, code editor like Visual Studio. And now if I stick in the double braces, we get a little prompt here to click our moustache button. So we click that, and a little bit like the auto suggestions for the tile scoping, we now essentially suggest some values for you that hopefully will be exactly what you need. Now, what I need to do, I know that the Splunk syntax is actually where computer name is in, and it expects a comma-separated list of computer names to search for, where each name is surrounded by quotes. So let me just put that in, and you'll see here that that's one of the examples, or one of the suggestions we have. So you don't really need to understand what this means. It is just JavaScript, but essentially the output is this. It's a list of server names surrounded by quotes and separated it by commas. This one is a list of server names, server IDs. So your GUIDs from SCOM, surrounded by quotes and separated by commas. This one just so happens to be the syntax needed by the ServiceNow API. So there's a good suggestion there if you are doing ServiceNow integration. Or I could grab the length, the number of servers, of the list, or I can grab a particular server out of the list. So these are just suggestions. So I can start by selecting this one. But if I wanted to, for example, if the API was a kind of an odd API and these were separated by, I don't know, they're separated by semicolons, I can edit this sort of quite easily there. Okay, so it's a very nice sort of easy editor, but we've got some suggestions here to make this really, really simple. So I can now use that syntax to take any list of objects and manipulate that list in order to be compatible with a REST API that I want to integrate with. So I just select apply changes. You should find now that we can pull in the security logs for all of my SQL servers. And that is taking a little while. Let's just refresh that. Let's just change this scope. Just want to make sure there are some logs there coming in. There you go. So I just increased the scope there to all Windows computers in my application. So there you go. So this is now bringing back logs, not just for one computer, not just for one application object, but for all of the servers that we've dynamically looked up within this enterprise application. And you can see here, because I copied it from a drill down, it doesn't have the server name, so I need to add that back. And that is a good opportunity to show you the Moustache editor improvements as well. So if you're familiar with custom labeling, here I have the computer name. I can just go into edit here, and same deal. If I do the double moustache, I get the little prompt to select from the available values. In this case, I'm just editing the label for computer name, so it's giving me an example label here, which is the computer name, but I can now edit this using JavaScript as well. So if I want to, for example, replace the common domain name that I have in my environment, so if I just want to replace sales int dot squared up dot com, with nothing. So just strip that off all of my domain names. I can do that and hit done. And then hit done there, zoom out. Ooh, I've got the trailing dot, but you get the idea. So using that WebAPI integration, I've now pulled in data for all these objects, and I can use that template editor even further to customize the views. So it does sound as a sort of a feature description. Just come back to the slides. It does sound rather cryptic, WebAPI multi-object queries, but really the use cases now this unlocks are very exciting. So, given any object within SCOM, you can now look up multiple other objects related to it and then go query external data from a data source like Splunk or ServiceNow and pull that into your dashboard. So really, really powerful stuff. And we'll be building additional tiles and perspectives on top of this core functionality that we've introduced into 4.3. So hopefully that's given you a taste of what you can do. As I say, expect knowledge-based articles and coffee breaks and the like coming your way just to really show how you can leverage this functionality for different data sources. So that is 4.2. So we had all of these features that come together to enhance perspective authoring. So streamlined authoring UX, that's where we don't even do the page reload anymore. We've tucked away the settings. Perspective hiding to allow you to tidy up the perspectives that appear in the perspective ribbon. Intelligent tile scoping, so adding data onto these perspectives. You don't even now need to think about the SCOM object model. You can just select what you want. And the multi-object queries for the WebAPI tile, allowing you to now pull data in for multiple objects in a scope. And really integrate those data sources more effectively. All of those features, as I say, are available for all perspectives, but certainly in the context of enterprise applications now, you can start to really fully customize those dashboards on your EA drill downs and really build some very powerful new dashboards with these features. So hopefully that's all really exciting for you. I guess the only question now is when you can get your hands on 4.2. So I just wanted to finish off with some availability and upgrade advice. So as you'll know, what we do at Squared Up is start by releasing a release candidate. And that release candidate is available right now. And actually, as webinar attendees, you are the very first to know that it's available. It's available on that link. So you recognize that is just a download.squaredup.com link. So you can download it from squaredup.com right now. We will also follow up with a release email with additional details of the download and, of course, referencing this webinar recording. The release candidates, that's 4.2.0. The .0 is the important bit. That's a release candidate. It's fully supported in production, so you can go ahead now, download that and get going. We recommend in this case an in-place upgrade, so there's no really big changes here in terms of anything that would expect to break any of your existing dashboards or perspectives. So unlike the big V4 release, this really is just an in-place upgrade, and that's what we'd recommend. If you do download this release candidate, you do, of course, get priority support. So for anyone who's downloading this, put it into production, we will be right there to support you through that. If you're sort of familiar with previous releases, what we do is release our .0 release of a new feature release, or as a release candidate, just to indicate that this is the first time it's gone out of the door. Obviously, we've done our full release close down internally, but if you pick up the .0 release, you will be some of the first few customers to try this out in your own environments. Please do let us know if you hit any issues, and we'll jump on those straight away. What we then do is wait for the dust to settle for a bit, and we release a GA, so a general availability release, a couple of weeks later, so that should be around mid-May. If there are any issues that we've had to jump on, that will include those, and that will most likely then be a 4.2.1 release. So depending on your appetite for getting hold of the latest and greatest and getting it into your environments, either jump on it now or sort of hold off for a couple of weeks and plan that later this month, and you'll have the benefits of getting the GA release. So hopefully you've enjoyed seeing the features and seeing what's new in 4.2 and are looking forward to getting your hands on it. Just before we wrap up and look at some of the Q&A, I want to do a couple of reminders about some news that we've released recently. First one is our new license editions. So if you haven't seen this, we released this actually with 4.1. What we did is we introduced a new Essentials plan. So this is replacing what we used to have as our Community Edition. So this is now our introductory level of Squared Up with all the essentials you need essentially for awesome HTML5 dashboards for SCOM. So all of the kind of the core features, and that's available at just a 3-user license. So if you're a very sort of small organization, maybe using the Community Edition, have been looking at V4 and wanting to get your hands on some of that new functionality, you can do so now with the Essentials package. Also to highlight, with 4.1, any ESP customer, which is now called an Enterprise Edition, you now get the data integration. So you get the WebAPI integrations and the Azure integrations. So if you are an Enterprise Starter Pack customer and you haven't upgraded to 4.1 yet, if you upgrade, you will get the WebAPI integration that I've just been showing you in the demo there. And the last bit of news is that with our EAM edition, that includes now all of the EAM Plus features. That's all rolled in. So if you're an EAM customer and you upgrade to 4.1, you get all of the EAM Plus features. That was the PowerShell availability monitoring, which is a really awesome feature, the link dependency monitoring, and the service status messages. If you were an enterprise customer and you've been thinking about EAM, the sort of news there is that the EAM license is now available at just a 10-user edition. So essentially, if you have a smaller environment, maybe sort of up to 10 users, around 10 users, you can now choose between enterprise or get the EAM features with Vader and so on. So hopefully just making our licensing model a little bit more flexible there as we have grown and our customer base has grown. Obviously, different customers have different needs, and I think with this new licensing addition options, we're really sort of meeting the needs of our broad customer base. So if you're not familiar with that, go check that out on squaredup.com/pricing, and you'll see all the details there, or just drop sales@squaredup.com a line and just sort of ask about your current license and how that translates. And then just to finish off, if you missed the news, I wanted to introduce Cookdown to you. So Cookdown is a new brand, a spin out from Squared Up to double down on our investments in the actual underlying SCOM platform. So while we're focusing on the dashboards, and we'll continue to focus on dashboards going forward, we've created Cookdown in order to really sort of invest further into the SCOM platform. So in particular, with the release of Cookdown and the launch of Cookdown, we've released an amazing new solution for SCOM that I recommend you all go check out and explore, and that's called Easy Tune. And that really is sort of reinventing the way SCOM is tuned, and it's the fast, simple new way to tune all of your management packs. So go check that out. If you have, you can go watch the webinar replay there. There's the link. If you have ServiceNow, you'll absolutely want to know all about what Cookdown are doing with the integrations with ServiceNow as well. So as you can see on the left-hand side, which is just a screenshot from cookdown.com, we're integrating SCOM and ServiceNow with both alerts, discovery, and service mapping. So go check that out and join the webinar that's coming up in a couple of weeks on the 15th of May from the Cookdown team. So there's the sign-up link there, and go and find out any more at cookdown.com. So that's just a couple of bits of news that have happened, I think, since we last sort of spoke on one of these webinars. So hopefully that gets you up to speed with what's going on at Squared Up at the moment. And of course, as I said in the roadmap, we have 4.3 already ready for close down, and it'll be coming out to you hopefully within a couple of months' time. So keeping up this frequency of releases. So it shouldn't be too long before we speak again and have even more features to show off to you. So I hope you enjoyed the webinar. We've just got a few minutes left before we reach the end of the hour. I'm just going to stick myself on mute, look through some of the questions. If there are any that haven't been answered or are worth sort of just surfacing to the rest of the audience, I'll do that. If you do have any questions about anything you've seen during this webinar, please do ask them now, and I'll do my best to answer them. All right, great. Thank you so much for all the feedback. Looking through it, I think it's all great stuff. Really good positive reception for all those new features, which is great. A couple of smaller kind of questions that I think the team have done a good job on covering. One, I guess, that came up that's worth sort of talking about. I'm just going to zoom right back to the example of this. I talked about how we've extended the query editor, obviously, to support these multi-object queries, so these sort of list or array scopes. I just want to emphasize the fact that you can now use really any JavaScript in those templates, which you couldn't use before. So if you were doing any ServiceNow integration, you couldn't, for example, take some data from the object in SCOM, manipulate it by doing a replace on the string or stripping off some of the string and then passing that through into the ServiceNow API, just because we couldn't actually execute any arbitrary JavaScript within that template. We now can. So essentially, we've got a full JavaScript engine on the back end of Squared Up that can securely resolve any JavaScript expression in that template, and that is going to support a whole new set of different integrations, say, for example, with ServiceNow. So regardless of whether it was a single object or a multi-object, just now we have that JavaScript support. It's going to provide a lot more flexibility with these API integrations. So I really look forward to probably Matthew and Co on the coffee break next month, telling you a lot more about that and explaining that in full detail. So please do join that coffee break if this is sort of the area that you're interested in and want to get some more detail there. Otherwise, I think that's a wrap. As I say, look forward to speaking to you again with the next release or in one of the intervening webinars. I hope you've enjoyed today's webinar. The recording will be made available and sent out to you via email, so you'll have everything you need. And with that, I wish you a very good day.